All right. Well, good morning. Shalom. Welcome. My name is Nate Wolf, and some of you have maybe followed my story since last fall. How many of you were here for 2018, Take on the World 2018? Okay, so a good handful of you. Some of you may recognize my wife and I. Some of you probably are like, I don't know who those people were. We didn't know anybody, and nobody knew us when we came to 2018. We had come into some understanding about the true biblical cosmology in 2017 in the late spring, and we found out about this conference. My wife found out about it. She heard an advertisement on Mark Sargent's channel about this Take on the World conference, and she says, Vermilion, Ohio, where's that? So she Googles it, and I get this text message, and she's like, yeah, I knew she was excited because she was like, dude, she was like, there's this conference an hour and 10 minutes from our house. We got to go to this. I'm like, what? And then I recognized Chris and Liz Bailey from some biblical health shows on Now You See TV. So we didn't know them, but I knew of them. And I thought, okay, I like those people. They seem like good character. And we decided we got to pull the trigger on this thing. So we came out not really knowing exactly what to expect. And I'll save the rest, really, because I'll be sharing that testimony tonight on the main stage. I think I'm scheduled for 7:30 to 8, but we'll see how the schedule goes. But for those of you who do know about my situation and have prayed for me, my family, my ministry, messaged me online, watched my videos, subscribed to my channel, and you're sitting in here this morning, I want to say thank you so much. It has been the most difficult year of our 27-year marriage, not because we don't like each other anymore, but because this has been a very challenging year for our family. But as you know, the Father in heaven is good, and he can take tragedies and trauma and disappointments, and he can turn those for good, right? Romans 8:28 and so many other scriptures. So we feel like we're like that plane that had a rough takeoff, and we've been in turbulence for maybe an hour or two with your seat, cinched up, and you're wondering if you're going to make it. And now it's kind of like, all right, things are just a little bumpy here and there, but things are smoothing out. So I want to say thank you so much for the support. Synchronize my watch here. I want to share finding your way on the flat earth. What is that? This is what I came up with. Originally, I was going to do more of just a straight up biblical cosmology. Here's some verses, here's some things to consider. I talked to Chris, and he's like, Nate, you and your family have so much experience this last year in dealing with pressure, dealing with attacks, spiritual attacks, physical attacks. Your whole world has been literally has been turned almost upside down for these truths that you are standing for. And so I said, you know what? I want to share some encouragement, some information, and I will be looking at some scriptures with you. But let me tell you, first of all, what this lesson is not about. It's not about how we physically travel on a fixed, immovable plane. Some of you are old enough to know the Planes, Trains, and Automobiles movie. So maybe you look at me and you kind of think of maybe John Candy or something. I don't know. Oh, I'd rather be John Candy than Steve Martin. He's kind of a goofball. But what this is about is navigating life as a follower of the Most High, as a flat earther. Now, I realize that in a group this size, not all of you may be convinced flat earthers, and that's okay. But I hope if you're not, you're obviously, if you're here, you're taking a serious look at things at a minimum. And I hope that this presentation will at least give you a window into what a lot of us experience. I don't want it to scare you off, but there is ideas in Scripture about counting the cost. What is it going to take to be a disciple of Jesus, of the Messiah, but also standing up for truth in general. So we're going to talk about standing up for truth, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about relationships, ministry and calling, spiritual warfare, and so we'll see about that. And hopefully they'll turn the air on, so I'm just going to faint. So let's do this. Again, I'm going to do my testimony tonight, but just in brief, in case you're not really sure who I am and what's going on. I got flat smacked by the Bible, and specifically by some scriptures in Robbie Davidson's documentary, The Global Lie. I don't know if any of you have seen The Global Lie. And I didn't even know what it was. I was studying for a lesson I was going to give for a church in Michigan on the flood, whether the flood was a worldwide event or a local event. And I was of the worldwide persuasion. And I got done with my study, and so I said, well, I'll go to YouTube and see if there's any good videos on the flood. I watched a couple of videos, and then all of a sudden in the sidebar, this is when they weren't, messing with all the algorithms and, giving you all the junk or hiding the good stuff, but the good stuff was just popping up on the side, and there was this thumbnail, The Global Lie, and I was like, wow. That year I'd done some sermons about Satan and his influence in the world, and I had just felt this burden about deception and truth. And so when I saw The Global Lie, I'm like, I got to know what this global lie is. So I clicked on that, and down the rabbit hole I went, and then my wife followed quickly afterwards, and then all four of my kids followed. So we are a flat earth family. We may have some little differences in thoughts on things. But then we came to take on the World 18. We didn't know anybody. Nobody knew us. We didn't know what to expect. And we were blown away. We were blown away by the people. We were blown away by the topics. And as you know, 30 speakers, 70 plus topics, we could only go to maybe 20% of everything. But just that taste that we got, we just knew that there was a reason for why we needed to be at this conference. And at the end, Sunday night, we actually had to cut out early because we had to drive an hour and 15 minutes back home. We didn't have accommodations out here. And so we were going to have to drive home at Sunday night when you're tired after several days of a conference and your brain is fried, and you're just like, I just want to go to bed, and sleep on this for a few days. And so my wife says, well, what does all this mean? What are we going to do with this? I said, well, we need to pray about this. So we prayed. And we just had this strong feeling that I needed to be doing something to share truth, because for over a year I had been just soaking truth in, but had kept it all to ourselves, right, other than our family. So we prayed this prayer, and basically we said, okay, Father, if there's something that you need us or me to do, please show us that. We just need some direction. And little did I know, did we know, that prayer would mean that almost 3 weeks later, less than 3 weeks later, September 14th, 2018, that I would be receiving a text message from my elders at 8:05 a.m. on a Friday that said, at 9 o'clock, you'll be meeting with all of us elders at the church building. And I was like, okay, that does not sound good. Well, they fired me. They fired me because we can't have a minister with that kind of association. And we can't have you in our pulpit Sunday. And I'd never taught publicly on flat earth, so keep that in mind. So I was being fired for being a false teacher without ever teaching anything falsely. Then we had a barrage of attacks from some people in the church, and that was difficult to navigate. But then a new ministry began. In fact, within a few hours, I don't know, have any of you seen my sad face garage video that I made, where I'm walking through my garage with my iPhone and there's all my books and all the contents, my files, and all my ministry stuff over 20 years. I'm going to try to show that clip tonight, but to show that because you see the man walking through his garage, although had faith that things were going to work out, was kind of a little bit of a deflated guy, and now you see I'm just, cheesing over here. So much better today. But a new ministry begins. And so I want to first share with you that truth has its challenges, right? And I got to jump to my notes here. Let's see. So when we come to unpopular truths can be a challenging experience for all of us. And this is whatever truth is unpopular. It doesn't even have to be flat earth or anything like that. For those of you who are 100% convinced of whatever truth you're sharing, that can be a huge challenge, right? Because when you're convinced and you have conviction, what does that cause you to do? you feel burdened to share that truth, right? I mean, if you really believe it's true, and for believers, we believe this is from the Word, then we feel that burden to share that truth. And so there's some challenges I want to just share with you. I like to try to be upfront, right? I'm not saying, hey, this is just all a cakewalk and it's just this glamorous life. And you guys know it's not, right? It's a challenge. But it may cost you your job. It may cost you your ministry. It cost me my ministry, or at least the ministry I had at the time. But I have a renewed ministry, which I'll be sharing more about. It may cost maybe some friendships, some family relationships, or at least strain them, right? How many of us have experienced that? Most of us, right? At least on some level, some on a grand level. I've talked to some people and they say, you know, my whole family has disowned me just because I believe some different things about creation, and I'm showing it to them in Scripture, right? When I lost my job at the church, my ministry at the church, it disconnected our whole entire family. Because we moved from Idaho after 8 years of full-time preaching in Idaho. We moved our whole family of 6 to Ohio, to Toledo area, just to minister with that church. And so could you imagine, my kids grew up, and a couple of them were just late elementary school when we got there. 1 or 2 was starting junior high. And then they went through, some of them, high school. So all of our connections, there were a few community connections, of course, but most of our close connections that we had built up over 7 years were at the church. And so imagine your minister is fired, it's sudden, and the public excuse that they gave, or declaration of why they fired me was, well, we're just going in a different direction with our pulpit. Now, if you're just a member and you don't know what's going on, but your minister just gets fired suddenly, what are you going to be thinking about that man? You're going to be thinking, oh, he must have had an affair. I mean, like, things are going smoothly for 7 years, and all of a sudden he's just like disappears. Like, it's like the old Cecil B. DeMille, 10 Commandments, where Moses starts to serve the Father, and Pharaoh's like, okay, let the name of Moses be stricken, off the record, off all the columns, all of this stuff. And so, it's a shock to your system. Of course, later on, as they found out that I had a YouTube channel and they started watching, people clued in pretty fast. But it may change your relationships. Thankfully, we haven't had family disown us, but we have a few family members that just don't even want to go there, right? Like, let's not talk about it. My mother is like super, super supportive. I wish she could be here. She's in Anchorage, Alaska. Maybe someday she'll get to travel with me and do some, listen to me speak. But it may change your whole entire life, right? Would you guys say our whole entire life has been changed? I mean, I can't imagine. I'm 46 years old, man. I don't care. Whatever. I got a faithful wife. Do your worst. My kids are teenagers in this culture, and their dad is that flat earth minister, man. And so pray for them. I have in my notes, it might cause spiritual attacks. Like, no, PowerPoint, no, it will. It will bring spiritual attacks. It's just going to happen. But I want to say this, and I'll say more if you bless me by coming Sunday morning on the faith stage. I think I'm again on right after worship. I'm going to share my journey of coming to the Father's truth, and I've got some PowerPoint slides. Darrell Lee lived that out with me, but there was some strong spiritual attacks that happened to us when we went to a men's conference that happened during the Sabbath, and there was blood, literal blood stains, and even a face or a handprint on the curtains. Right before the second attack, I noticed it, and I called DR in to say, look at these curtains, man, like, how could housekeeping miss that? I've got those pictures in my slideshow for Sunday morning, so I'm going to share more about the spiritual attacks. But I don't want to scare everybody off and depress everybody, so I want to share with you that, you know what, when we have these things that I've mentioned, when we're standing up for truth and these things are hitting us, we are in good company. We're in very good company. And these are just a handful of examples. I really, just want to share a little bit with you guys about this. I know the time is just like flying by. But, here you have Moses, right, in Exodus chapter 5. And he's told, him and Aaron are told to go to Pharaoh, and say, let my people go. And do you remember what Pharaoh said? I mean, he's like, Moses says, our Elohim wants, our God, Yahweh, he wants you to let his people go. And what did Pharaoh say? I don't know this God, right? Now, why would Pharaoh say something like that? Do we realize who Pharaoh was? Pharaoh, in the eyes of everybody on the earth at that time, was a god, right? In fact, the Egyptians believed that Pharaoh was God in the flesh. He was Ra's, the sun god. Ra was the sun god, that he was supposedly the most high, right, deity. But Pharaoh was supposedly Ra's incarnate physical son. So you are approaching I guess what would have been considered the God on earth at the time, the most powerful nation. I mean, their chariots would strike fear, okay? The thundering of the hooves would strike fear into everyone. So Moses goes to Pharaoh and he says, who is this God? I don't know this God. And of course, the rest of the story. Moses even had his own people grumbling against him, continually. And it got to the point where Moses was like, okay, Father, just kill me. Just kill me now. I can't handle this. So we're in good company, So thankfully, none of us have to go tell Pharaoh what's up, right? But we go tell some people, maybe in some authority positions, important positions in our life. What about Jeremiah? Jeremiah was told that before you were formed in your mother's womb, I knew you. And he says, I have plans for you. Now people say, oh, okay, but that was a prophet, a specific prophet, and we take this verse out of context. I believe there's a principle there. The principle is that when the Father calls you to service, and make no mistake, he knew every one of you. He knew me before I was formed, before you were formed in your mother's womb. Amen. So he also knew that each of you would be here today and this weekend. And I know not everybody is going to get fired and travel around sharing testimony and writing a book and all these different things. But I do know this, that the Father has a plan and a place for each one of you, whether you're young or old, male or female. What he needs are willing servants who will humble themselves enough to pray a prayer, something like what Jennifer and I prayed. Okay, this feels significant. What do we do with this? Are we supposed to do something with this? And if so, what does that look like? I mean, I didn't know. We didn't have a clue. Although my wife, she blew me away. She's sitting in the car and she says, just kind of nonchalant, you'll be speaking next year at Take on the World 19. As I'm getting ready, after we prayed that prayer and we're getting ready to back out of this grass over here, I'll just look at her like, what? And she doesn't consider herself a prophetess, but I believe that she felt that. I hate to use the word feeling, but I believe the Spirit was speaking to her. Sure. And maybe preparing her and preparing me, planting that seed. And then it was a short while later when Chris and Liz Bailey said, Nate, we want you to speak at Take on the World. We want you to share your testimony. And I thought I was going to speak one time. I was so excited, and I'm speaking on every stage and beach chats and panel discussions. And if I look grouchy and super tired Sunday morning, I apologize. I'm probably going to sleep for 3 days. We don't have time for this lesson, but Lamentations chapter 1, the first 16 verses, Jeremiah weeps and laments over Jerusalem. And because of Jerusalem's sin and idolatry, Yahweh sends the hordes of the armies of the north, the Babylonians, and much of Jerusalem at least the cream of the crop, were taken into captivity. Read Jeremiah 1 and then read Lamentations 1 and look at the connections there. But we're in good company because Jeremiah was told, you're going to be my spokesman to the nations. He didn't just say Israel, he said to the nations, right? To kings and authorities. And the Father was straight up with Jeremiah. He said, they're going to fight against you. But here's the promise. They're not going to prevail over you. Now, Jeremiah, we use this metaphor. We say, well, man, I felt like I was thrown in a pit. Jeremiah was literally thrown in a pit, not once, but twice. But they didn't kill him. They didn't succeed in stopping him because the Father had made that promise, and he is faithful to his promises. His word will be done. How about Esther? I mean, man, you talk about a brave person. Not just a brave woman, a brave person. Most of you know the story in Esther chapter 4, verse 16, through the first few verses of 5. But her people had this edict against them. Haman had schemed against them, and Mordecai, her uncle, was trying to give her advice on this, and she called a fast. She told Mordecai, she says, call a fast of the people, and don't eat anything for 3 days, and pray on my behalf. And she says, I'm going to present myself to the king, and she says, if I die, I die. And most of you are aware that there was a law that if you approached the king unannounced, it could be, and most often was, a death sentence. If he did not extend a scepter your direction, which was giving you the grace to not get killed and approach, then you were dead. And that was what happened most of the time. But she says, if I perish, I perish. She recognized that God had a calling for her, that he had a purpose for her. How about Jesus? How about the Messiah? Have you ever been called crazy or delusional or a lunatic for your beliefs, whether it's flat earth or whether it's something else, right? Keeping the feast, keeping the commandments. In Mark chapter 3, the Messiah's own family members thought he was crazy. They thought he was a lunatic. They tried to seize him. And so sometimes when we're in some of our darkest moments, we say, well, Father, you don't understand. Or Jesus, you don't understand. It's like, they understand, right? Been there, done that, and got way more than the t-shirt. But our Messiah knows what it's like for his close family and associates to call him a lunatic, to make fun of him, to reject him. And then, of course, Matthew 27 and other verses, they sought to kill him as a result. They didn't just think he was a lunatic. They made plans, at least some, made plans to actually kill him. So I believe that we are in very, very good company, but I want to share this as well. You may have heard this quote, and perhaps this comes from 1 John chapter 4, verse 4. The task ahead of you is never greater than the power behind you. Well, let's go to the actual scripture, 1 John 4:4. Greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world, right? And this system of the world. And I know that first and foremost, that application is spiritual, right? And it has to do also with our salvation and our proclamation of Jesus. But greater is he that is in you than he is in the world. And so these were the types of scriptures that gave us comfort as we, walked on this journey. Now, I have something I want to read to you. I adapted this from something that Charles Swindoll wrote. It's called The World Needs People Who Are This Way. And this is from Living Above the Level of Mediocrity. I've shortened it just a little bit because it was rather long. But the world needs people who cannot be bought. The world needs people whose word is their bond, who put character above wealth, who possess opinions and a will, who are larger than their vocations, who do not hesitate to take chances, who will not lose their individuality in a crowd, who will be as honest in small things as in great things, who will make no compromise with wrong, whose ambitions are not confined to their own selfish desires, who will not say they do it because everybody else does it, who are not ashamed or afraid to stand for the truth even when it is unpopular. Does that fit anybody in this room? Who can say no with emphasis, although all the rest of the world says yes. Now, I know this is a real, upfront look at, finding our way on the flat earth. But I want to also share this, and then I will probably have a little bit of time maybe for some questions. But there are blessings from truth. Amen? I mean, there's blessings. If there weren't blessings from truth, we would not be here. We would have just crawled up in a hole somewhere. Or we might have packed up and moved back to Alaska and lived in the cabin in the woods, I mean, catching silver salmon on a river in the middle of nowhere, is much easier than what we're doing now. And whenever I say me and I, that's my whole family, because my whole family was fired for truth, They have experienced all of these things that I have shared. But we know that truth is what ultimately sets us free, right? John 8:31 and 32. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. But the catch is that if you continue in my word, right? The truth is life. Messiah said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me, or except by me, John 14:6. And so not only is truth a gift that the Father has given us, but the truth is a gift that we give to others, right? And I'll be the first to say that flat earth, or knowledge of the true biblical creation, is not what saves people. It is the sacrifice, it is the blood of Yahusha. Amen? But I know many people personally that this deep dive into these truths and this discovery is what determined for them that if this is the true creation and this is true, then I need to get to know the Creator. And I don't know, some of you who raised your hands earlier that were here in 2018, if you met Griffin Crowley. He came from Columbus by himself, kind of a small-statured guy, glasses, thick black glasses, real friendly, quiet but friendly. We met him in the lunch line, and one of the lunches, and we were talking to him, and he was like, yeah, I was an unbeliever, basically an atheist, and came from a family of people who, were not believers. And he says, I somehow stumbled across this flat earth thing, and I went down this rabbit hole, and he's like, I came to realize that this was the truth of creation. And so therefore, he said, if this is true, then I need to get to know the Creator. And so it was a stepping stone to salvation. And so never underestimate, and it's not just flat earth, can't the Father use a number of different circumstances? It could be a drug addiction. It could be a deep tragedy, a loss in your family. It could be a job shift. It could be a humbling. Or it can even be something wonderful that happened. And you say, man, there has to be a God in heaven, right? But truth is a gift. And so I like to say, make sure that you receive that gift, but don't hoard it, right? Don't be selfish. Give that gift to others. I love this scripture in Proverbs 23:23 that makes it easy to remember. Buy the truth, okay? In other words, get it at all costs. Sell it not. Also, wisdom, instruction, understanding. Why? Because these things lead to life, right? And so never give up, never sell what you have, this truth. All right, let me see here. Let me make sure I didn't leave anything important out. Yes, okay. We got, how much time do we have, Dustin? About 15 minutes, or we started late? Okay. I'm going to go through a few scriptures real quick, and then if we have time, I'll open it up. But Nathan Reynolds is not here. Okay, we'll take a small break in an hour, and then we'll be back for 45 more minutes. Okay, so relationships. Now, as you know, I spent the bulk of this presentation talking about standing up for truth, because I think we all need encouragement in that. But I want to spend a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes or so, sharing about other ways that we find ourselves on flat earth. Relationships. Relationships can be challenging, right? Just in, quote, normal life. You come into these truths and you have maybe some trials and tribulations that you never had before, right? What you experienced before was a cakewalk compared to this. Romans 12:18. I try to, think of a verse or two for each of these, but there's many verses that fit with this. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, in other words, so much as it depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Does that include your spouse? Absolutely. Does that include your children, your in-laws? You're like, okay, wait a second. Now you're talking about my in-laws. Live peaceably with all men. It doesn't mean we shy away from sharing truth, because we also can find scriptures that say we are to be the light of the world, and we are to be led into all truth. And Paul, in Acts, he said, my conscience is clear because I haven't shied away from teaching you the whole counsel of God, of Elohim, right? And so all truth is important. The gospel salvation is first and foremost, but all truth is important. And a little quick little sidebar, it's funny that people will criticize me and others because we do spend a good bit of time talking about biblical cosmology. But almost everybody has something that specifically they have felt called to speak about or to share about. And you could think of any number of other things and be totally fine with that. But because I want to share with you about the true nature of creation, which will help you to understand that the Father in heaven is up. And he's not at the edge of some ever-expanding galaxy in some weird dimension that we can't understand. He is right above us. How far? I don't know. Is it 2,000 miles, 3,000 miles? Is it 100 miles? I don't know. But I know that I had more comfort than I ever had before when I recognized that heaven is up. And when you look in the scriptures, he's looking down. The angels are coming down. Jesus came down and Jesus went back up. So that gives me great encouragement. But we need to try to be at peace. And even if we try to share these types of truth and it causes strife, make sure that you do not dishonor the Father or his word or cause someone to stumble because of the way that you go about your truth. I'm not saying shy away from truth, because I don't, but just do so in a loving way. Ministry and calling, again, this one I want to make sure I got up there. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before you came forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee. I set you apart. I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. Some of you might be saying, man, Nate, I couldn't do what you're doing. Like, no way. I can't, I don't know what my talents are. I don't know if the Father has a plan for me. The only thing you need to do, two things. Humble yourself, seek his will, and pray fervently. And don't just say one prayer, but pray about it. If it takes weeks, if it takes months, if it takes a year, pray about these things. He is faithful, and he will answer your prayer. Now, he may not answer it the way you thought it should be answered. When we prayed that prayer and Jennifer said, you'll be speaking at Take on the World 19. She didn't say, in 3 weeks, you're going to be fired. And our family is going to be drugged through a living hell for 11 months. And then we're going to have this amazing time at Take on the World 19. It's going to all be worth it. Some of us aren't going to get fired for truth, but we might have somebody who just tries to make our life miserable on the job, who makes fun of us, right? Oh, he's that guy. He's that flat earther, or whatever. You know what? The Father knows, and when we don't know, all we need to do is ask. And if we're patient and we trust in his timing, my timing would have been, don't get called in suddenly and get fired in 3 weeks and have your whole life turned upside down. Mine would have been, ease into it the next few months, have a leadership meeting and say something like, hey, would you guys be willing to study something from Genesis chapter 1? I'm seeing some things there that are different from what modern atheistic science is telling us and even what most people believe in the church. And could we sit down over the next few months and, I don't know, maybe have a picnic and a prayer and sing Kumbaya and just kind of ease on into this thing? Not going to happen. I think every truther knows these verses here. Ephesians chapter 6. We have to remember this is a spiritual battle. The physical people that harmed us emotionally and hurt our feelings and fired me, there's a spiritual battle raging behind the scenes, right? And we need to put on the full armor of God. Oh, you know what? When you're speaking 3 times, sometimes you forget. You guys have a treat, okay? I told you I was going to show you the bloody curtains on Sunday. I'm going to show you right now. I forgot they were here. DR and I went to men's retreat at Messiah's New Life Tabernacle in Avila, Indiana, about 6-7 weeks ago. It was the first Sabbath that I was purposefully desiring to keep. And we went together as brothers, and we were at the Roadway Motel. And Friday night, we checked in. First thing I do, because I'm a big, sweaty man, okay, hot all the time, I went over to the air conditioner and cranked that bad boy full blast for about an hour. There was no blood on those curtains. The air conditioner is right here. The curtains are right in front of the air conditioner. Next day, we go to the congregation, and we have a wonderful time of fellowship and learning, and just God is confirming some things for me all day long. We take a quick break to go back to the hotel, freshen up, change out some gear. We were going to go back for the brisket dinner and some kickoff of the men's stuff. And we go back to the hotel, and I go to adjust the air, and I see this blood splatter on my curtains. But it wasn't just one. It was literally like 5 or 6, DR. I only got 3 slides, but I don't know if you can see that, but even now this is a different blood spot, okay? Even on the dowels, the curtain rods that help you open the curtains, both curtains had blood on them. Now, this is the one that freaked me out. You be the judge on what you think this is. That's a handprint or a face or something. But I saw that, and DR and I were taking pictures and video. DR was freaking out, right, DR? He was like, dude. He was like, man, we gotta talk to the desk about this, man, front desk. So I was like, you know what? Let's just rest for a few minutes, and then we'll go take care of it. So he goes back to his room. I pray for a little bit, and I'm thinking about the day and processing a lot of these confirmations. And all of a sudden, I start to have another attack. So the first attack came Friday night. I woke up. I felt this heaviness, this pressure. I felt sick. My face was flushed. I felt like I was all of a sudden like getting the flu or something. I was weak and shaky. And I looked at the clock, and it was exactly 3 a.m. And that like freaked me out. I knew right away this was a spiritual attack. And so I prayed about 20 minutes. I prayed through that. We went to sleep. We went to the next day, Saturday. The blood splatter that wasn't there Friday night, this was about 5 p.m. Saturday. I noticed the blood splatter, talked to DR about it, and then spent a few minutes in the room. All of a sudden, I started to have another attack. I felt the heaviness again. I felt an evil presence, and my lungs started filling up with fluid. I was having just like a sudden asthma attack, which I've had some allergy-induced asthma and things, but you start to sniffle, and you start to this, and maybe a while later, you get some wheeziness. I had an immediate, almost emergency, and I went next door to DR. I was about to say, I need you to take me to the hospital right now. And he's looking at me, and again, he's like, dude, are you okay? I'm like, well, he's like, we're out of here. Grab your bags. I grabbed my bags out of there. He says, you stay with me tonight. And as soon as I left that room and went over with him, the heaviness left. Within 2 or 3 minutes, would you say, DR, my breathing had returned to normal. Stayed the night in DR's room, no problems the rest of the night. So I don't know what was going on in that room, but DR says, we're going to turn those keys in. What room are you in again? And I was like, I'm in room 322. Skull and Bones, 322. Daryl was talking to one of his family members who's very knowledgeable about numbers and different things, and he says, what's 322? And she got real quiet, and she's like, son, 322 is murder. That's what that means. So if that didn't freak me out, I don't know what did. All right. Sorry, you're not going to sleep tonight. You're going to all have nightmares. That was confirmation for me and for DR that everything that I experienced that weekend that was true, and that I was on the right track, and Satan was trying to scare me off. He was trying to get me sick so I wouldn't hear the messages that I needed to hear. Prayer and fasting. Okay, and then I'm going to stop, and if we have any extra time, we can take questions. If not, we'll wrap up. About a month and a half or so, a month before the men's retreat, I decided I need to get healthier. I need to get more spiritually focused. I started praying and fasting every day, and I would fast and I would pray as I went walking. And I would go walking almost every morning and pray. And I really believe that had I not become focused in prayer, and if I had not fasted and prayed for a month before this event, I probably would have just thought I was getting sick, and I would have not have resisted, and I probably would have just said, DR, I can't come tomorrow, I got the flu. Or I probably would have got scared and jumped in DR's truck and said, take me back to Toledo, bro. But I talked to Jared Cressman of Through the Black because the 3 a.m. thing kind of freaked me out. And he's like, dude, he says, it sounds to me like it was an attempt at sleep paralysis. And I don't know if some of you know about sleep paralysis. If you're not aware, Google it. But there's spiritual connections. And he says, but I think it failed because you were prayed up and you were focused and you were resolute in why you needed to be there, and the Father helped you push through that. But prayer and fasting has to do with protection. It can be something relating to repentance. It can be asking for direction. It can be worship to the Father. It can be self-denial. And then here's my last 2 slides. I love Revelation 2:10 because it lets us know that Satan is going to mess with us, right? He's going to try to harm us. And he says that some of you shall be cast into prison that you may be tried. It's a trial, right? It's a test of your faith. And ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life. I think there's a widespread application to that. So, finding your way on flat earth. If you didn't know your way, hopefully today you have a little bit of a clue. But how much time we have, Dustin? Okay, we get 5 minutes? Okay. 5 minutes. I know that's not going to give much time, but question.
I heard this under the, when you were talking about the benefits of truth.
Yes.
I saw this picture in my mind of a ship moored to a dock. And once those lies are shattered that hold it there, it's free. And then,
Yes.
then all that crap that goes with that gets free to be questioned.
Yes.
And the spirit of Antichrist that runs this world the way it is loses their grip on people.
Yes, and it is a freedom. In fact, tonight, my 7:30 p.m. main stage, I'm going to share a little bit more about the testimony. And I say I was fired for truth, but then I also say, was I hired, ? And also you could say I was freed for truth, right? Because the ropes that kind of held me in check and had authority, once those elders slid that piece of paper across the table to me that said you're fired effective immediately, they no longer had any control over me whatsoever. I was thinking in my mind, as soon as I get my books and things out of this office, I'm going to make some phone calls. And you know, the first person I called was Rick Hummer. And he called a bunch of people. And all of a sudden, everybody was like, I want you to come on my channel. I want you to share this testimony. I had no idea how this would affect people. I didn't even know how it was going to affect me. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's cool. Like, I'm going on Celebrate Truth with Robbie Davidson. Like, what does that mean? Like, I was nervous. I was about to pass out. Anyway, one more quick question, and then we'll let you folks go.
Has any of those elders that fired you, if they felt any conviction later about what they did?
I'm hoping they did. I have not been contacted by any of the elders. Some members of the church have contacted us, and to be fair, most of the people at the church did not make the decision to fire me. And even though there were a very dedicated handful, a few individuals and a couple of families that were really being aggressive towards us and just hateful messages and things, the majority of the church, I think, was just stunned. And most people to this day have still not reached out to us. I don't think that they know what to do with this. And they're not sure what all is actually true. But I keep running into the elders at the grocery store, and I ran into one of them at Walmart 3 days ago, buying breakfast for Take on the World. I'm pushing my cart out, and he's pushing an empty cart in, and he sees me, and he's like, and so I just kind of gave the, I see you there, you know. I didn't stop to say hello, but I'm leaving the door open, and I do pray for them. And I do know this, there are people at that church that are closet flat earthers. And there are many people from that church that watch my stuff all the time. Some people probably watch it because I really get into their skin, and other people watch it because they know it's true. But think about this, it's probably going to either never happen or it's going to take some time before those people will go public, because look what happened to me and my family, right? Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Bless you guys.